The conventions we used all helped to provide anticipation throughout our final piece, though we did attempt to kind of shake things up a little bit. During our initial research, we found that few people did not like gore in thriller films, finding them to be a bit cliche. Films such as Saw obviously use a lot of this, and like when doing research in it, they found that it was probably a bit overused in a lot of the thriller films nowadays. Because of this, during the development process, we decided to steer clear of gore for a couple of reasons. First was because we wanted our thriller to be more subtle and a bit more psychological, and also because gore just generally ends up looking fake and not very good. We wanted our thriller to be realistic, something that could happen in everyday life, because it's normally the things that do happen in everyday life, things that could happen to anyone, that end up to be scarier and more scary to the audience. Part of the piece that we had to do was obviously challenging the conventions. For our final piece, we wanted to make a thriller that maybe have been a bit more exciting to watch and was relatively fresh to the audience's eyes. Although we have used some of the thriller conventions that I mentioned earlier, we tried to use them in a way that would be more interesting than the usual kind of don't go through that door because everyone knows there's a bad guy behind it kind of way. Also, one of the main cliches we found that people wanted us to absolutely avoid in our preliminary research was when the protagonist walks into very obvious traps. Although we took this into consideration and tried not to make anything too obvious, the point is that these traps that the protagonist ends up walking into are the kind of things that make the suspense in the films, and kind of juxtaposing to what the audience had previously stated, suspense was one of the largest things that they wanted to see in our thriller. Therefore, we decided to go with kind of like a half and half, really, a compromise. The trap we used was obvious to the audience, but in the context of the film, wouldn't have been so obvious to the protagonist. This is the idea of the door opening in the background of the shot. Opening in the background of the shot that we were doing. That's where we came up with the idea for that one. The audience may feel it was very obvious that the protagonist had not left the door open when she got out of the car, but if you think about it, you're not really expecting something like that, not really expecting a pram being in the middle of the road. Your last thing you're going to be thinking of is, oh, did I leave my car door open? You'd be going out there to see what was going on. So the audience would see the door opening, but the protagonist was unlikely to realise that she had closed the door in the first place. It's a common mistake to make, so hopefully the audience don't get too angry about that one being put in there.